So welcome everybody. Welcome to today's session. And I look forward to having everybody here and really having a lively conversation at the end of our presentation today. So please make sure that you are you're asking your questions. You're putting your questions either in the Q&A or in the chat box. So my name is Maureen Hahn. I am the President and CEO of the Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and Work, CCRW. And I also sit on the steering committee for DWC. And it's my great honor and privilege today to introduce you to three amazing women that I get the privilege of working with quite often. And they are going to talk to you today on income supports for people and workers with disabilities. So first we'll hear from Krista Carr, who is first we're going to hear from Anne McRae. Sorry, thank you. Thanks, Krista's looking at me like, no, Maureen. So first we're going to hear from Krista Carr. Yeah, gosh, Anne McRae from Independent Living Canada. We're going to then flip over to Krista Carr. She's going to talk about from her perspective at Inclusion Canada, and then we go over to Rabia Kader, who is going to be speaking from Disability Without Poverty, and then again a lively Q&A following. So with that, I'll ask everybody except for the interpreter and Anne to turn off their cameras, and when you're done, Krista, just feel free to come on, and then likewise for Rabia. Thanks very much.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this session. I'm really excited to be here and just wanted to start by thanking Maureen and the rest of the organizers of this conference for putting on such a fantastic conference. I've learned a lot so far. Today, I'm going to talk a bit about a project that is just about to get underway. So I'm going to give you some background to it. You may recall in late summer, the federal government announced a funding opportunity through the Social Development Partnership Program, the disability component of the program. And the purpose of the funding was to support a community-led engagement process related to the Disability Inclusion Action Plan. For those of you who may not be aware, during the speech from the throne in 2020, the government announced that they were going to be implementing the first ever Disability Inclusion Action Plan. And this plan was to will include a new Canada Disability Benefit, a robust employment strategy for Canadians with disabilities, and a better process to determine eligibility for federal programs and benefits. The interesting thing about this funding call was that the government wanted only one organization to apply for the funding, which meant that the disability community had to come together and decide who they wanted to see lead this work and who some of the partners would be. They also wanted the engagement to be about reaching hard to reach individuals with disabilities. So those who were from marginalized populations and who were living in remote areas as well. They also wanted the funding to focus on the 4 pillars of the Disability Inclusion Action Plan. The first pillar is financial security, and this pillar will address the immediate and long-term financial needs of Canadians with disabilities. And the initial focus of it will be on working age Canadians with disabilities. And their first priority is to reduce poverty among persons with disabilities through a new disability benefit. Pillar 2 is going to be around employment, and it will be taking an intersectional look at some of the longstanding barriers that persons with disabilities face in the labor market and in the workplace. It will offer a range of supports for both employees and employers, and of course, will include a robust employment strategy for Canadians with disabilities. And then pillar 3 is disability inclusive spaces. And the focus of this pillar will be to address barriers in public spaces, including community and social infrastructure, and programming that are currently preventing Canadians with disabilities from fully participating in their communities and the economy. And last but not least, the fourth pillar is about modernizing or a modern approach to disability, which will look at how we can better develop simpler processes for determining who's eligible for various programs and services that the federal government offers people with disabilities. So when the funding was or the funding was announced, they asked the disability community to coalesce around deciding who would receive the $650,000 that would be provided over 15 months to do this engagement process. In addition, within that money, that funding, $50,000 would go to each of the pillar leads. So they wanted to have a lead for each pillar. So after they hosted their inaugural sort of invitation to this funding call, the Pan-Canadian Disability Coalition hosted a meeting, and they asked all the groups that had been invited to submit whether they wanted to lead a pillar or lead the entire project. And then we all met as a group to choose who would do that. And the groups that came to the fore for leading the project were my organization, Independent Living Canada, and Muscular Dystrophy Canada. So, and then there were groups that came to the fore who were interested in either leading or supporting the leads of the various pillars. So it was agreed, after we whittled the numbers down and people were in agreement of who the leads and the supporting organizations might be, it was up to MDC and ourselves to determine how we were going to work together, and then get together with each of the pillar groups and decide how those pillars were going to work out. So MDC and us, we got together quite quickly, and it became a no-brainer to figure out where everybody's skill sets could be best utilized. And so it was agreed that Independent Living Canada would be the recipient of the funds and would lead the project overall, and with the support of MDC. And they have tremendous capacity in the area of research, knowledge transfer, and report writing. We were also able to host then meetings with each of the leads of the pillars, and we were able to come fairly quickly to an agreement on who those groups would be. So for income security, it's going to be Inclusion Canada, with support from Every Canadian Counts. And then one of the other things I should have said earlier was that even with each of the pillar leads, there's an expectation that they have to, consult, partner with at least, 15 other organizations, so that we really, really get to ensure that we are reaching hard to reach, marginalized individuals and organizations across the country. So income security, as I said, will be led by Inclusion Canada. Employment will be led by CCRW. Pillar 3, inclusive spaces, will be led by the Canadian Association of the Deaf in partnership with Rick Hansen Foundation and Spinal Cord Injury Canada. And lastly, modernizing the approach to disability will be led by Eviance in partnership with People First Canada. So we were really excited to have such a great cross section of the disability community involved at these beginning stages of the work. We then went away and we crafted our letter of intent and sent that into government. They in turn then got back to us to say that they would work with us to develop the actual proposal and budget, which took quite a while. We last week heard that the project has been approved, and we're just waiting now to sign the contract. So I still have to keep it fairly high level until we get everything crossed and I's crossed and T's dotted. I don't know if I said that right. Then we'll be able to begin the work of the project, and it's supposed to start around December 15th. So we do have an initial meeting with the steering committee with the pillar leads. And we'll then be beginning this project. But really, it's going to be a project in which we are going to put in place robust measures to ensure that we're reaching anybody and everybody that wants to participate in this. We have, a healthy budget for accessibility costs, and also to ensure that we can reach people whose first English is not English or French, and also to ensure that we are able to put the material in various formats to ensure that everybody can participate. So I'm going to leave it there, and we'll be happy to take questions afterwards. But I'm going to turn it now over to Krista Carr.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks very much. As Maureen mentioned, my name is Krista Carr, and I'm the Executive Vice President of Inclusion Canada, coming to you today from the traditional and unceded territory of the Wolastoqey and Passamaquoddy peoples. And a little bit about Inclusion Canada. We're a national organization. We have 13 provincial territorial associations and over 300 local associations across the country. And we work on behalf of people who have an intellectual or developmental disability and their families. And we do that across the lifespan, so from birth to death. And at the national level, a lot of the work we do is around policy change and systems change, and that type of work to ensure that our systems and our programs at the federal level and our policies and our benefits and all of those things really meet the needs of people with an intellectual or developmental disability across the country. So from my own perspective, 70% of adults with an intellectual or developmental disability who are living outside the family home live in poverty. If you look at people with disabilities more generally, over 50% of persons with disabilities in Canada live below the poverty line. We all know that the pandemic has made this much, much worse. Costs have gone up all over the place for just about everything you can imagine. People have been made to pay for things like personal protective equipment and sanitizers and all kinds of things that they never had to buy in the past. People haven't been able to use public transit, have been forced to use because of risk of catching COVID, and have been forced to use more expensive means of transportation. People who had used publicly accessible Wi-Fi in places like libraries, etc., haven't been able to access that. People had to purchase technology if they could in some circumstances. So there's no question that the pandemic has exacerbated poverty levels for people with a disability. In the fall of 2020, the government announced in the speech from the throne the creation of the Canada Disability Benefit, lovingly described as the CDB. And legislation was tabled to establish the benefit in the spring of 2021 before the House rose for the summer. The legislation was not passed before the House rose, so therefore died on the order paper. While the recent speech from the throne was silent about the benefit, the Prime Minister's statement on December 3rd, for those of you who have seen it, you can find it on social media, the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, did reference the intent to move forward with the benefit. So the big deal here is, what is this benefit really going to look like? And how long is it going to take to get it into the hands of people with disabilities? Inclusion Canada, as Anne mentioned, has been given the privilege of leading the pillar consultations on the financial security pillar of the Disability Inclusion Action Plan, which has been announced by the government. So that essentially means looking at the announced Canada Disability Benefit from the perspective of what is it that individuals with disabilities across this country want this benefit to look like. The number one goal of the benefit is to ensure that it lifts people with disabilities out of poverty. So that is the critical goal. But it will also be critical, the design of the benefit is really going to be what's critical to determine if that actually happens or it doesn't. So our role at Inclusion Canada will be to consult broadly and widely with people with disabilities, not just people who have an intellectual or developmental disability. We've already done lots and lots of that, started that work when the benefit was first announced within our own population area, but also just people with disabilities in general and their representative organizations across the country about the design of the benefit and report that back to government. And some of the things that are going to be critical to get input on will be things like, and this is not an exhaustive list, so if I miss something, you'll have to forgive me, but it would be things like the amount of the benefit, the eligibility criteria for the benefit, how this benefit will interact with provincial and territorial benefits that people already get, like provincial and territorial disability income support, housing allowances, disability supports, all those types of things, and also how it interacts with other federal benefits and programs that benefit people with disabilities. How will marital status affect the benefit? So for example, if you qualify for the benefit and you're married and you live with someone who does not receive the benefit, are you able to keep the full amount of the benefit? This becomes a problem in lots of benefit schemes. So we really have to dig down into that. How do we continue to incentivize employment for people with disabilities when this benefit enters the landscape? Because one really critical way of lifting people with disabilities out of poverty is to help them get real work for real pay in, good jobs in across the country in the sectors that they are interested in and want to contribute to. And so we need to be really sure that the existence of this benefit doesn't preclude people from being supported to find employment and maintain employment and progress in their career trajectories in employment. So that's something we really have to be focused on. And we have to look at how much employment income, look at people being able to keep employment income if they do begin to work, those types of things. But we know that employment is not a reality at the moment for everyone. And we need to be sure that people who are not currently working or people who have situations where working at the moment is not possible, that this benefit really allows them to not have to live in poverty and to live a good life. We need to look at things like what happens if someone loses a job and isn't working at the moment and then needs to go back on the benefit, get reinstated. How do we look at a rapid reinstatement? How is this benefit going to be administered? How do we ensure that it's a simple and streamlined application process? So all kinds of critical questions about the design of the benefit, and they're more than what I have just mentioned. Those are just a few of the things that we really have to hear from people with disabilities, and for those people with disabilities who are not in a position to speak for themselves. We need to hear from the organizations that represent those individuals. We need to hear from families who support those individuals, etc. The design of the consultations is really also going to be critical. We've got to ensure an intersectional approach to the consultations. We need to be sure this benefit lifts all out of poverty and not just some. So we need to make absolutely sure that we're hearing from all the people who are even more marginalized. They might be intersections of race, disability status, gender, for example, women or other, all of those pieces, we really got to ensure we're hearing. For example, you know, I've already heard from people who have talked about, you know, what happens when you're living in tents? What about people who are homeless? You know, how do they get access to the benefit? What about, so there are all kinds of pieces we really have to look at to ensure that this benefit is going to actually lift people out of poverty and be of benefit to the largest possible number of people with disabilities we can. We also have to be consulting with people in the North, in Francophone communities, urban communities, rural communities, Indigenous communities, and other communities. And we need to ensure our consultations are accessible to all. So how do we make sure that we're conducting consultations that everybody can be part of? So whether that's accessibility features like ASL and LSQ and CART and the language of your choice in terms of French and English, as well as ASL and LSQ, how do we ensure that we can talk to the largest number of people with disabilities in the country? So those are all going to be really, really critical questions that we need to work through. And we need to get the consultation started as soon as we can. We need to hear from the largest number of people we can, and we need to get those recommendations back to government. We really want this benefit to get rolled out as quickly as possible, but we don't necessarily want the government to design it all on their own. It needs to be designed through the voices of the people with disabilities who and those that represent and support them to ensure that it really does have a real impact on the largest possible amount of people it can. So I think that's all I really have to say. Looking forward to consulting with any of you that are at this presentation today, and many, 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 many more as we move forward and collect the feedback of people with disabilities in this country and get that feedback back to government and really push for the best possible Canada disability benefit we can get. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my friend Rabia to continue with the presentation.
Thank you very much, Krista and Anne. You know, an amazing panel here. I'm honored to speak with such powerful women, and of course, my friend Maureen there. I'm speaking to you from Mississauga, Ontario, the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the New Credit most recently. My name is Rabia Khudr. I am a person with a disability. I am blind at this stage in my life. I do a lot of grassroots work, and today here I'm speaking on behalf of the work that I'm doing as National Director with Disability Without Poverty. So Disability Without Poverty emerged late last year, and then early this year really started to pick up momentum and engage. And the reason we emerged was out of a promise made by government to bring forward a Canada Disability Benefit. During the pandemic, obviously, as has already been stated, we discovered that people with disabilities were falling into deeper and deeper poverty. There were all these added expenses, all these additional barriers and whatnot, and people with disabilities were in fact forgotten in the emergency measures, in the emergency response and supports that were put out. In fact, the benefit for people with disabilities didn't come out until November or December, or some people even had to wait into the new year. And it was tied strictly to the disability tax credit. You had to qualify for the DTC to get that one-time only payment. So the promise was made by government. The mandate was given to the minister for a disability inclusion strategy, action plan, whatnot. And then a budget, in the spring budget, there was commitment made to a consultation process spanning 3 years. Well, we started a conversation with a number of people through a series of webinars last fall to talk about some of the issues, talk about some of the challenges, and start reaching out and building capacity. We engaged hundreds of people and their allies through those series of webinars with a number of experts. Come the new year, we began establishing a leadership team. A leadership team made up of people with disabilities from different parts of the country with different types of disabilities, with their own unique diversities, whether it was race, gender, type of disability, social location, et cetera, et cetera. We brought together this team of people with lived experience as disabled people and, in some cases, caregivers of people with disabilities. We began to engage in more deeper conversations. We brought together some individuals to help us engage organizations better. And we began laying out our principles. Principles committed to joint design, to mobilizing individuals with disabilities, their friends and allies, and people that care. Popularizing the movement, making disability poverty a real issue for any caring Canadian. So we began doing some research around the design. We brought experts together who government regularly consults, economists and academics, to sit with people with disabilities from our leadership team, myself, others, engage in conversations, engage in research, and bring forward some modeling data. In this journey, we never committed to a dollar figure because we don't know what that magic number is. There's too many nuances to the number, and we are nowhere near saying, here's the amount that ultimately government should commit to putting in people's pocket. In this country, we have over 50 poverty lines, and the disability poverty line is a little bit higher than the poverty line for people without disabilities. We have vast differences in this country. And given those realities, we need extensive consultation and research. We did an Angus Reid survey, which showed 88% of Canadians want to see people with disabilities lifted out of poverty. They want to see fast action on a Canada Disability benefit. We know that 2 in 4 people with disabilities live in poverty. We know that 4 out of 10 people in poverty are more likely to be people with disabilities. And we know that most Canadians want to see this change. They want to see us build better for the future of everyone. So building with that momentum, we began engaging with the election. As Krista mentioned, legislation was tabled and died with Parliament. We wanted to make sure that we use our democratic rights as people with disabilities to make sure we are heard. We launched a campaign to encourage people with disabilities to vote. We engaged messaging in various languages from our leadership team, including Cantonese, Italian, Hindi, Punjabi, French, and English, of course. We continued this momentum with an open letter that we pushed out post-election, signed off by prominent Canadians, high profile Canadians. We collected over 200 signatures. And we sent this open letter to the minister, the prime minister, the minister of finance, and we put it out there for public consumption. This letter was signed by prominent names like Senator Art Eggleton, like the former Lieutenant Governor David C. Onley, like Krista Couture, and many, many others. Following that open letter, the kind of response that we got to the open letter empowered us to do an e-petition, because we learned that everyday Canadians, labeled influential or otherwise, wanted to have their say. People with disabilities and people who love people with disabilities, who care about people with disabilities, who want to see a Canada Disability benefit, genuinely benefit people with disabilities and quickly wanted to have their say. So we began a parliamentary e-petition process. That petition was launched on November the 12th. We have collected over 7,000 signatures and counting. We need a much stronger push because other petitions in this country have galvanized signatures exceeding 140,000. I think for people with disabilities, we can meet or exceed that. But we need every person with a disability spreading the word on that. So in principle, I believe what I've heard from Krista aligns with everything that we are also advocating for. We are working outside of government, but we are here to support the Disability Inclusion Action Plan and the Income Security Pillar in particular. We have engaged many, many, many people through our e-democracy platform, through Othello in conversation. We are finding new and innovative ways to constantly talk to people with disabilities and their friends, families, and advocates in order to gather their thoughts, their opinions, their needs, and their demands for and of government and the Canada Disability Benefit. So we are continuing with this momentum to keep speaking to government from the outside, offering a hand in solidarity to work with everyone involved, government and civil society as a whole, for us to truly bring about a Canada Disability Benefit that will make history, leave a legacy, and help people with disabilities lead a good life who are financially struggling right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabia. Excellent, excellent words from all of our panelists. Appreciate your time, your commitment, your energy. Really appreciate your energy. So with that, I forgot to tell everybody as well that following this, the panel today at 2:05 Eastern, we will be having a networking session, and the networking session will be around this topic. It's just open to other people who may not have attended this this session today. But we're going to talk about exactly what do people with disabilities living in Canada require from a federal income support system, and what does the federal initiative need to consider. So if you're interested in sticking around for that, I also invite our panelists to stick around for that as well. But what we'll do is we'll open the room for more of a networking piece, more brainstorming, more, you know, hearing from you as opposed to just hearing from our panelists. No offense to the panelists. I didn't mean to say just. So with that, we do have a couple of questions though, and I encourage everybody to put your questions in the Q&A box. The first question is just what territories are folks coming from? And thanks for including intersections of land acknowledgements and pronouns. So if we can maybe keep that in mind when we're talking. I'm coming to you from the city of Toronto today, Mississaugas of the Credit and and Haudenosaunee. So thank you for reminding us of that. The other question, I think that this one is more for you, Anne. What is the timeline to get the recommendations back to ESDC? Do you know what that is? What the timeline is?
Yes, so we're hoping to start as of December 15th, and then it's 15 months. So it's a pretty tight time frame. So we have to have it finished by the end of next year.
Okay. And also for you, Anne, can you repeat the pillar lead for the eligibility? You said it was people first and
for eligibility, it's Eviance, and they're partnering with people first.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And then I guess, I'm sorry, this is the last one to you as well. And is the engagement for all across Canada or just one province and territory?
Oh, no, it's from all across Canada. This is a, pan-Canadian consultation process.
Okay. All right. And thank you for that, Anne. And just that somebody's asked me what's the name of the next Zoom meeting. That I wasn't clear on that. So you stay in this room for the networking session where we're all going to be able to bring our perspectives on the question of what we feel people with disabilities need who are living in Canada from an income support system, and what does that federal initiative need to consider. So I don't see, is there a location that people will be able to go to see the consultation in their province?
That's coming. When we start this project, we'll be sending out lots of information for everybody to be able to get access to the material.
Okay, perfect. And so maybe I'm just going to ask a question then. Rabia, one of the things that you had said was you feel that when Krista was talking that these two initiatives are in alignment with each other. Can you expand on that a little bit? Because I know that for people who are involved with this work, that we understand that there are different people coming at it from different angles. But can you just talk about what you see is complementary and how you feel that we can continue our work together?
Well, essentially, we're looking at joint design, right? We want to put people with disabilities and people who advocate for people with disabilities in the center, in the mix of designing the benefit. We don't want government to design it alone. So that's definitely a common principle for us. We don't want clawbacks. Like if people are married in those kinds of cases. We don't want the benefit to be of hindrance to those who wish to work. It shouldn't harm their potential to work. It shouldn't be of any detriment to their existing work. We want a benefit that isn't restrictive and limited, that it helps as many people as possible genuinely lead a good life. So I think there's a lot of common ground there in terms of values. The work around this benefit is indeed about the values that we hold dear as Canadians, that we want to ultimately impact the outcome.
Thank you. Krista, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I think that the work that Disability Without Poverty is doing in amassing people with disabilities across the country to be thinking about, talking about, and expressing clearly what their desires are, to see in this benefit will be of great value and input to the process that we're going to try to undertake, which is to try to harness all of those voices and put together some coherent and very concrete recommendations that we can give to government so that we ensure that this benefit is sort of by the people, of the people, and for the people, as opposed to serving government interests.
Right, good. And that theme has come up a lot. I've heard each of you say that. So that's excellent, because it is, this is our chance to make sure that that voices that are important to us are heard, right? And in the chat, there's one comment that says, I've become more disabled as I get older. I'm not ready to retire on disability, or PWD out in BC, I'm assuming. And so, so maybe I can throw that as a question out to the group to say, you know, what are you thinking? Early thoughts about employment. And I know that I heard, Krista, I heard you talk about that, about not creating barriers for people who want to and are able to work. And so, but maybe you can expand on that a little bit, and what both Chris, this is a question for Krista and for Rabia. If you can expand on what your early thoughts are on that.
Do you want me to go, Rabia, and then you
Go ahead.
go? Or, oh, so it does, order does not matter to me. I guess I would say, so I think employment, coming from a population, people that I represent on a day-to-day basis, it's a 20 to 25% employment rate. So that's a 70 to 75%, or sorry, 75 to 80% unemployment rate. Although, and people want to work, they can work with the right support. And so while I think this benefit is critically important to support people with disabilities not having to live their day-to-day lives in poverty, I think we do have to ensure that people are still getting active employment support. So in other words, for people who want to work, that there is still a very, very robust and active system of support in place to ensure that people can get the assistance that they need, that they can get the support on the job. But from a benefit perspective as well, for example, if someone isn't working, it receives this benefit to support their income so that they can live a decent quality of life, and does want to go to work and is supported to go back to work, they shouldn't automatically be cut off from the benefit either. So we have to look at, how do we have a generous employment exemptions in place? How do we make sure that people don't lose by going to employment, to work, that they're not more impoverished, that they're better off by being employed? I mean, that's what we want for people. And that's going to take some serious design things. We also have to think about things like, for example, I would love to see that anybody who is currently in receipt of provincial territorial disability income benefits, so it's AISH in Alberta and it's ODSP in Ontario and whatever it's called, depending on where you live, they automatically become eligible for the benefit. Well, then we need to be absolutely sure that they don't all of a sudden become written off by their province and territory or the federal government in terms of active employment support. So I think there's just a lot of issues that we need to really think about and sort through. And I think that's where organizations and individuals who are coming to conferences like these, who are passionate about employment for people with disabilities, as I am as well, I think we're going to need all the feedback we can get.
Could I add one thing?
Of course, Anne, go ahead.
Just before Rabia speaks, I think one of the other things that's going to be important is how we look at employment, that it's not just full-time, part-time, that if somebody, as the individual who wrote this comment said, you know, if you're somebody who doesn't want to retire from work, but your disability is impacting you more as you age, but you don't want to give up the opportunity to work, that maybe you could work 2 days a week, and that would really do a lot for you in terms of you're still contributing, you're doing what you love to do, but you're doing at a level that is consistent with whatever level your disability is at, and the benefit would kick in and allow you to do that. It wouldn't penalize you from working a couple of days a week or whatever you require. Sorry, Rabia, I just wanted to throw that in.
You kind of took my thunder there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to bring up the same issue of people, with temporary disabilities, with episodic disabilities, with, who are facing, progressive disabilities,
Right.
where they need to, work limited hours, or need to change the way they work, or need to temporarily not work and then, re-engage with their work. That again, the benefit should not disincentivize them, but also should not take away any supports they have to be employed at the level that they are able to be employed. So again, it's, really looking at the benefit through an anti-ableist, lens, to make sure that we are not introducing new barriers or exacerbating barriers to employment that people already face because of the way provincial programs are designed and territorial programs are designed, or private pension plans are designed. So we genuinely want people to be as productive as they need to be, as they are able to be, have the supports in place for them to be employed within what is possible for them, and what is probable for them, and have a benefit that truly benefits them. I mean, that's the redundancy of the word, but we want a benefit that's not a token, that's not just symbolic, but it actually benefits people with disabilities who are struggling with their income.
Right. Thank you. Absolutely. And bringing people out of poverty. We talked about that, right? So, so one of our other colleagues, Alan Cohen, has asked, very often people with mental illness or mental health conditions have difficulty getting benefits of any kind. How do we ensure that people with psychosocial disabilities do not need to jump through hoops and are eligible for the benefit?
Well, I think if I can just
go ahead, Robbie.
Maureen, I think it's about the disability definition, right? About making sure that there is an all-inclusive definition across the board that's, intended to get people into the circle and not exclude them, right? That is more inclusive of what we recognize as disabilities under our human rights tradition.
Right. Yep. Anne? You're on mute, Anne. You muted because of your dog.
My dog is now gone.
Okay.
I was just gonna add that, I think it's gonna have to be done in concert with, which is why I'm excited about this opportunity to do the consultations in the 4 areas of the Disability Inclusion Action Plan, is that we're going to be talking also about modernizing the way we create our eligibility for various supports. And so, it would be absolutely awesome if you just had to apply once and you never had to apply again. And it was very much streamlined. Listening to the deputy minister speak earlier about the work that they're doing at the federal level in terms of, you only have to apply once. You tell them what your disability is, it's in your passport and away you go. That's the kind of thing we need to be talking about when we're talking about modernizing the system, I think. And in terms of income support, it would go a long way, helping people just do it once.
Yeah. Yeah, good. Thank you. There's a quick question here for Rabia. I missed the name of the petition you mentioned where more signatures are needed. Would you mind repeating it, please? And if you're able to maybe put a link in the chat. We can also post it on the conference website.
If you can post it, that would be great, Maureen. I'm sorry, just trying to go back and forth and cut and paste the link right now is
fair enough.
Not going to happen that quickly for me. But if you go to disabilitywithoutpoverty.ca, there you will find the petition information on the website. Also, on our social media channels, we've been pushing it all over the place on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. So please, share it out there. And if you search up Government of Canada parliamentary e-petitions, we are listed there.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks, Rabia. And actually, this was a question by somebody in the chat is, where can we find this information? And so I think that that it's important that we at the conference make sure that we're including links and we're including information as much as we possibly can on the website for for everybody to pick up within the next 3 months after the conference is over. Anne, go ahead.
No.
Oh, no,
Good.
you're not going to go ahead. So there's another comment that maybe you can speak to, that I'm hoping all this will be addressing disabilities that go much further than poverty. And we're talking about equipment, technology, et cetera. And I know that, and you talked a little bit about that for accommodations, and you know, just having it once, doing it once, you know, getting the disability label once, and then you're, you know, you've got your passport done. But can you maybe talk about the intersection of that you might be thinking about using for equipment or technology, making sure that that is all accessible as well? Or is that part of this movement?
You know, I think it's critical that people have access to that kind of support as well. And again, I think while you may have to apply once and say, what are the supports you require and what that technology is. I'm profoundly hard of hearing, so I know that over time, the technology that I'm going to need is going to change. So there's got to be some flexibility in that process for you to be able to say, you know, this is how it's changed for me now, and now I'm going to need this, and that it's a simple update to your passport or whatever in terms of income support. That it's a fairly simple process for you to update that in terms of what your needs are.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
I think it does. I think it does. Anything to add to that, Rabia?
Yep. No, I don't have anything to add. Sorry.
Okay. Great, thanks. So the last question before we go into our networking, where again, we'll ask everybody who wants to join in networking just to raise your hand. And then the hosts of this panel will let you in on the panel. And you can turn your cameras on, turn on your microphones, and we can have a discussion that I'll happily facilitate, but also that if you don't want to participate, but you still want to listen to what's going on, please feel free. You don't need to raise your hand. You can stay in the session. But quickly, there's one last question that I think you'll have to pull out your crystal balls for, and that is, I get that there's a lot to be done in terms of design, but is there a timeline or an ETA for when the benefit would actually be available? And then the next question is ish. So of course, not a complete timeline, but ish, like a timeline ish. Does anybody have a crystal ball for that?
I don't have a crystal ball. I think it's our job to push, and we need to push it along as quickly as we can. You know, we need to push government to move as fast as we can. Now, having said that, we just don't want it done in the absence of the voices of people with disabilities. So, you know, we don't want them to just go ahead and decide themselves what it should look like, because we may very well not get what we think is best, or the individuals with disabilities feel is what they need. And so it's a bit of a balancing act, I think. So our job is to get our work done, get the consultations done, and try to push this along as quickly as possible. I would personally like to see, the government has taken the approach that they are going to table legislation. They did table it, but it didn't pass before Parliament rose. We're pushing now to see them, and as is Disability Without Poverty and lots of others, to see them retable that legislation, which would enshrine the benefit in law, which makes it a lot harder if governments change in a minority situation, those types of things, for it to go away, for the benefit to go away. And then to work with the disability community to kind of establish some of the pieces like the amount and the eligibility criteria and how it interacts with their benefits and all that in the regulations. So that's the other piece. So we need to we need to really push to try to move it along, but we need to make sure that we get really solid recommendations in on what it should look like.
Agreed.
Thank you. So there is another question. The petition is up. Robbie, you put it up. You did it, and somebody also pushed it to me, and so I put it up there as well. There is one more question before we open it up, if that's okay. Is there a planned connection to work with other universal basic income initiatives? What could be the pros and cons of that connection? I also greatly appreciated the consideration for provincial constraints, because I know there is a concern that provincial governments will use this to decrease provincial benefits.
So
Rabia?
maybe I can jump in here. So we do have a provincial strategy to mobilize people again. So we have a strategy well underway. We have a couple of community organizers in British Columbia and some support from the Vancouver Foundation. We're working on something similar in Alberta. Quebec is also underway with our friend Guillaume and the folks he's connected to engage again provincially to make sure that there are no clawbacks, that provincial governments don't take this as an opportunity to, save on their budgets and say, oh, well, if the feds are doing it, we don't have to do anything more. We still want to keep working with provinces to push forward whatever promises they have made to keep those commitments, and certainly not to claw back anything, and also to address some of the other issues that people are identifying. We don't want people losing other provincial benefits that they have for assistive devices or home modifications or anything like that, resources that might be available for them at a provincial or local level. We don't want those impacted with the Canada Disability Benefit. And that's why it's important for us to organize province by province, bringing people with disabilities together to ensure that they're exerting their democratic influences.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabia. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. I know that Krista has to leave us. So I want to, before we go on with our networking, I want to thank very much the panel for your insight, for your dedication. I am thrilled. I'm going to be thrilled to sit here with you this time next year and find out what's going on, right? Because this time next year there will be an update. Right now, everything is in the future, and it's the plans about what's going to happen. So it will be very, very interesting to have you all back. I'm assuming you're all going to come back because you'll all owe me one by that point too. So I'm sure that you'll all come back. Anyway, so thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the delegates. If you want to be involved in this networking room, in this networking group, just raise your hand and you'll be pulled onto the panel. And then we can have an open discussion about what we think should be included with this type of a disability benefit, what the federal initiative needs to consider. Start off with that right off the bat. And I love the fact that you raised your hand. You're staying here anyway, so you don't.
Oh, okay. I'm just trying to do what I'm told.
Yes, no, that's awesome. And so thank you to the panelists, and we can let the attendees in. Melody or Josh?
Yeah, we are promoting them to panelists.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll just be patient. I'm not always the most patient. Hi, Sherry. Oh, it's so nice to see you.
It's great to see you too. And I wanted to say thank you so much for the amazing job that you've been doing throughout this conference. I know I'm speaking on behalf of many other people who feel that way too.
Oh, it means a lot coming from you, Sherry. Thank you. So we'll just wait. I think that a couple more are going to be joining us, and then we'll pose that question, right? We'll pose the question of what do you think is needed? What does this federal initiative need to cover that we need to make sure that we consider? So we can go ahead, Hubert. And we can, if you're on screen and I can see you, you can do this, no problem. But if you've kept your camera off and I can't see you, just please raise your hand off.
No.
So we'll go Hubert and then we'll go over to Christina.
I'm still always concerned about the people that
Then share.
don't have the opportunity to go to work, won't be going to work, and still need all this other service, all these other equipment and things that they're not going to be getting because they're not going to be trying to go to work. So I don't think it's all about getting to work, and people need things. You know, we just heard one of the panelists that we have coming up had an accident with his Hoya lift and won't be able to be on a panel in the next session. So it's a good example of things that people need. And it goes far and above the poverty level. You know, it goes far and above the basic equipment to get to work. It's people need a lot of things that are much further than a disability and poverty.
Yeah. Thanks, Hubert. I agree with you. I think that, and we've talked a lot about that at this conference, about the need for, it's not just about getting to work, it's about how do we get to work. Just I think that there's a little bit of confusion with Alan. Alan would like to come on as a panelist. So Alan, I've promoted you to panelist. I think you have to accept it. And then once you accept it,
Yes.
you'll be able to come on the Brady Bunch with us. So Christina, over to you.
Hi. I just basically, I guess, I'll try to make it as short and sweet as possible. I have more than one disability. I have 2 sons that live with me. They're adults. They get lots of supports through Community Living British Columbia because of their disabilities, because one has intellectual and my other has autism. But me, I recognize different things of myself in my sons, and it does run in my family of autism. And I've never gotten diagnosed, but now, I mean, I could just leave it. But when I try to get employment, I get discriminated literally because they think they can see something different in me that I don't see. And I try very hard to hide it, but
So Christina,
it's run like I have not scoliosis, but spinal stenosis and chronic pain to the back and everything now. But you can go ahead.
Christina, can I ask you a question then? What for you, in order to, because really what we're talking about here is a benefit, right? A disability.
Yeah.
And so what do you think that disability benefit needs to ensure is part of that in order to help you?
I need physio. I need supplements. I have thyroid disease and arthritis, and I don't know if it's due to that, but I pay for all my supplements myself, which takes a chunk of money. And I'm trying to stay healthy, but with lack of money, it's really, really hard.
That's really good. Thank you for that, Christina, because and we hear that as well. We hear that, I hear that from people that we work with here at CCRW who are looking for work. They don't want to leave their provincial financial supports, not because of the finances, not because the money's keeping them in poverty, but they can't afford to, if they don't, especially if they've got precarious employment, they're not going to be able to get the benefits that they need in order to live a healthy life. So Christina, thank you so much for that. I know that we've made notes of that, but we'll come back to that, I'm sure, again.
Okay.
Sherry, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you. Thanks to the panelists for your presentations. I had a question and a comment. Maybe it would be Ravia to whom I should address this question. You mentioned eligibility based on the DTC. And I'm wondering, and perhaps Anne, you may know, or anybody else in the room may have some answers to this. Is there any jurisdiction of which you're aware, any other program which has better eligibility criteria to which you can point, and we can use some of those examples as a model for our work? And maybe I'll leave it there and I'll do my comment after. So.
Yep, I'll come back to you.
Thank you, thanks.
Rabia?
It's an excellent question. Do I have an answer to it? No, I don't think anybody's gotten eligibility right yet,
Right, right.
because
Yeah.
eligibility is always targeted toward who can we keep out? How can we keep, how can we spend the least, right? That's
Right.
sort of our, capitalist undertone that
Right.
we're intending to benefit, and yet we're our goal is to weed people out.
Yes, and very medicalized as far as I could see as well. So
Yes.
there's
Can
work
I-
to do there.
Can I add on though? Is there a benefit that's out there that is either federal or provincial that is not necessarily for disability, but is for another group that we may want to be looking at for best practices or promising practices there? I think about old age security, for example, or I think about child benefit. If there are any type of alignments there. Not my area, so I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there.
No, I think those are, Maureen, you're absolutely right. Those are two areas that we really need to look at, because those are not necessarily tied to people with disabilities, right? They're tied to the average Canadian.
Right.
Yes.
But those benefits typically are, a little bit easier in the sense of with children or the elderly as age and your level of income as reported on your income tax form. So it's pretty objective. And then when you get into disability, you're always looking at somebody else to make a judgment about you.
Yep.
And so we turn to the doctors typically. And so we're really, I'm wondering about where else can we look? I mean, maybe veterans benefits. I don't know and haven't really studied that, but it becomes a little bit more complex. And I think we need to do a lot of work. I was so happy to hear that eligibility was one of your 4 pillars. So, and just a brief comment, Maureen, if I may.
Yes, please.
In some of the work that we've done in the past on disability income programs, we've often tried to separate the income part from the supports part, because the income part, everybody needs a decent house or accommodation. Everybody needs utilities and heating and, the basics, food and basic clothing. So we all have that need. We need to ensure that nobody falls below the poverty level with respect to that. But when it comes to the supports and services, that is so highly individualized. And I would hope that we could keep that separate so that the people who really need substantial and, a significant amount of support for that would not in any way fall back or be included as just a lump sum, because we won't get enough for people that way. So it's just one way of thinking about how do we address the poverty issue as well as the individualized supports and services, which need to be paid attention to, I believe, somewhat separately. Thanks very much.
Well, Sherry, your point is very, very well taken, and it's exactly what Hubert opened with, right?
Exactly.
It's we can't look at people in just as if there is no intersection of other issues in their lives. We have a lot of experiences, including transportation to and from work, including daycare, including accommodations at work or at home, including elder care. All of that has to be taken into consideration, because we don't just exist in isolation. So
Exactly.
and that's why we're talking about this here at the Disability and Work in Canada conference, because one of our pillars, of course, is appropriate and hardy supports for employers to become disability confident, but also for the workers, so that the only way, because we know that a healthy workplace is about healthy workers, and we can't have a healthy work place if we don't have healthy workers, and if people are living in poverty and they don't have homes and they don't have transportation, they don't have childcare, they don't have all these other really important things. Oh, okay, I'll stop on my soapbox. Sorry, Josh just said 5 minutes, Maureen. So now I see Manon has her hand. Oh no, it went back down. Manon, did you want to ask a question or not ask a question, but get involved with this? And then I see Anne, and we have been told that we have 5 minutes.
So I'll try to be fast. I'm on the workers with disability with my union, and I am employed, but we are having lots of issues to keep people at work, having the proper accommodations, and also have access to the services like physiotherapy and all that, because there's caps on benefits. And when you fall off the caps of benefits, you do not have access to the public one because you have your employer's one, but you no longer have access to your employer's one. So I think that the people that are employed, we want to keep them employed. And I know that it looks like the fat cat issue because you have a job, you have some benefits, but if we no longer have access to those benefits, eventually the people, I see lots of my members getting out of the job because of that. So how do we make it happen so people can stay employed with proper benefits so they can take care of their health? So
exactly. So when it comes to it, it's not a choice between going on CERB or staying in your job, that you do have that you're raised out of, and I think this is what Robbie and Anne keep saying, raised out of poverty in order to make sure that we're healthy. So Anna, I'll go over to you, and then I don't see any other hands at the moment. Oh, Darcy. We'll go Anne, Darcy, and then Yvonne.
This is just very quick, and I it might be a bit off topic, but I don't think it is. I think one of the other things that needs to be addressed, so when we're looking at disability support, is a lot of times they make a distinction about whether your support is something you need for work or you use it outside of work. And I've had the experience with, as an example, with hearing aids or any technology that I might need to be in a meeting or whatnot, that employers have said to me in the past, well, you know, we can only fund things that are going to be things that you will use at work. And I'll say, so I get to use them here at work, but I can't use them at home.
Yeah.
And I've heard of people saying that, you know, I've heard people say to me, well, you actually have to leave whatever it is at work. It can't be something that you're taking home with you, et cetera. So and that can become a real barrier. Or they'll say, we'll only pay for a certain percentage of what it is because it's not something that you just use at work. So we'll pay 50%, but you have to come up with the other 50%.
We need to look at the whole person.
Yeah.
We need to look at the whole
That's right.
person. Yeah, thanks, Anne. Darcy, we only have a couple of minutes. So Darcy and Yvonne, Ellen, I'm not too sure we're going to get to you, my sweetheart. Darcy?
Okay, I'll be really quick. So a little background, I have a son with autism, and I'm in BC, and I work for a company, and we help people who are funded through CLBC. So I'm on both spectrums of it on either end. So where my suggestion or idea or whatever it is like my son, he's on the disability tax credit, and now it's expiring. And now I feel like I have to prove that he has a disability again. He's been assessed. He has autism. He gets the provincial $6,000 or whatever it is for occupational therapy and all those things. But I live in a community where we have none of those resources.
Right.
And the neighboring cities don't have people who come to our city. So we have to travel.
Yeah.
And I understand that's supposed to be covered under that. But now our disability tax credit is being taken away because it's expiring, and he doesn't need total care anymore. So he's technically not disabled.
Right.
And so just a thought to add to that, to interject to what we were talking about, where my frustrations it's.
No, it's important. Once again, right. It's making sure that it's the whole person. It's not just in one situation or another situation. So Yvonne, I think we've got time for you if you wanted to jump in. And then we only have 1 minute, so I don't want you to get cut off.
All right, thanks, Maureen. Yeah, mine is sorry and hello and thank you, but it's I've got a mixed chronic complex conditions, and I'm almost 50 and still trying to find information all around, and I'm trying to study as well at a college. And through them, I was able to get the doctor's appendixes and, get information. But at work as well, it's different. and then you have to go and apply for each one. So
Yes.
it's necessary to go like, across, and I'm a single parent too. So, and it's difficult not to, but most people think of this idea that if you're single and a parent, and if you have these disabilities, like you should not be able to buy a house, or you should be renting, and you should be, so you can't think of those hopes. So I don't know how we can, but like getting, and it's difficult to find information of where you fit, because I work full time and I study full time, and I'm trying my best to get something better. And discrimination is hardly a word to be used in all this time. But again,
No. Well,
it's like
Yvonne,
somewhere we can get a link. Yeah.
yeah, and Yvonne, I hope that you'll get a lot of information from this conference,
Yes.
and that you'll follow up with the links that are embedded in the website and in the discussion group. So
Yes, I
with
copied
that, I think we could go. So we could go on this forever. The nice thing is, again, we're at the beginning of the process. We're not at the end of the process. So your voices will be heard. I've heard from both Rabia and Anne, as well as Krista, that your voices are desperately wanting to be heard as well. So with that, I thank you very much. I think we're going to close off the session now. So thank you for coming in. Take good care, everybody.